Our story's main character is Ivan, a courier delivery boy. That day, he was doing his usual deliveries when his phone suddenly vibrated. He answered the call, and on the other end was an unfamiliar woman who told him she was pregnant with his child and that they needed to talk. But Ivan was so busy with orders that he thought it was a scam. Annoyed, he said he didn't have time and hung up. He then dove back into traffic, weaving through it carelessly. A short while later, Ivan arrived at the food delivery center. His colleagues were standing outside, excitedly discussing something. He asked his chubby colleague what they were talking about. The man told him that the daughter of the city's most influential Su family was about to marry the son of the city's richest man. Ivan showed no interest. Then his colleague showed him a photo on his phone and complained that such a perfect girl was being married off to a rich but ugly guy. The moment Ivan saw the photo, he froze. The face looked familiar. He snatched the phone from the fat man's hand. Slowly, his memories became clear. He realized he knew her. She was the girl who had come to him drunk one night. Then the call he had hung up on earlier flashed through his mind, and he realized it probably wasn't a scam. The whole incident had happened a month earlier. The Su family's daughter, Sarah, was stumbling down the hotel corridor. Her head was spinning badly, and she suspected that a man named Olive had spiked her drink. She was heading toward her room, 809, but in her hazy state, she got the number wrong and ended up at room 86. Thinking the door was slightly open, perhaps she had forgotten to close it herself, she entered. Inside, Ivan was sitting on the bed, already drunk and still drinking. His mind was filled with the rejections he had received, people saying his pride was too strong, until he finally accepted becoming a courier. At that moment, the girl who could barely stand stumbled into his room and collapsed onto his bed. She looked up and asked who he was and if he could help her. She was dizzy and her body was burning up. Ivan, drunk himself, looked at her beauty and thought how stunning she was. When Sarah came closer, begging for help, he became confused. It felt like a dream. He clenched his fists, trying to restrain himself, but he was drawn to her. Then the memory fragment suddenly broke, and Ivan returned to the present. He was still staring at Sarah's photo on his colleague's phone. His colleague started mocking him, reminding everyone how Ivan always made up stories like he was having an affair with an international movie star. The other employees joined in the laughter, recalling his claims of being an arms dealer or the head of some elite Beijing family. But Ivan remained completely calm. He said they didn't understand anything and that he was telling the truth. Suddenly, the conversation stopped. A luxurious red sports car pulled up in front of the delivery center, drawing all the couriers' attention. The driver's door opened, and a girl stepped out. It was none other than Sarah. All the couriers stared in shock, whispering how incredible she looked. As she approached, someone recognized her from the photo. Everyone was stunned. This was the daughter of the Su family. No one could understand why she had come to this small delivery center. They began to suspect their colleague wasn't lying after all. Sarah walked straight up to Ivan, who was casually stretching at the time. She asked why he hadn't answered her calls. Everyone's jaws dropped. They couldn't believe Ivan actually knew the famous Sarah, but Ivan showed no reaction. Calmly, he asked what was going on. Sarah looked him straight in the eyes and got straight to the point. She was pregnant, and the child was his. A deathly silence fell over the area. No one could comprehend how this rich and beautiful girl was carrying their friend's child. Ivan himself was shaken. He rubbed his eyes as if trying to wake up and asked if she was sure. Sarah replied seriously that he could come to the hospital with her if he wanted. She walked to her car and waited. His colleagues urged him to go, and Ivan finally agreed. He asked a friend to cover for him, and the two left in her red sports car, leaving the stunned colleagues behind. On the way, Ivan asked if the child was really his. Sarah turned and asked why she would lie about something so serious. Ivan said that if the child was his, he would take responsibility for both her and the baby. Sarah looked at him skeptically and laughed, asking how he planned to do that on a courier's salary. Ivan leaned back comfortably and said there was no shame in honest work, and he could provide them with everything. Sarah reminded him of her status in the Su family. Ivan waved his hand dismissively, saying status and such things were meaningless. His carefree attitude annoyed Sarah, and she slammed on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, and Ivan's head hit the windshield. Angrily, he said she had done it on purpose and asked what was so special about her family. Soon they arrived at the hospital. Sarah parked the car and calmly said they had arrived. As they got out, she warned him to think carefully before making big claims about responsibility. She reminded him of the serious consequences he would face if her family found out a courier had gotten her pregnant. This angered Ivan, and he clearly stated it was no joke to him. If the child was his, he would definitely take responsibility. Sarah ignored him and told him to follow her. They walked through the hospital corridor until Sarah turned toward a door labeled operating room. Ivan stopped abruptly and asked nervously why they were going there. Sarah turned and said she was going inside. At that moment, Ivan realized she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. Panicking, he grabbed her hand and tried to stop her. He tried to convince her that even if she thought he couldn't afford them, money was not a problem, and he would find a way. Just then, a nurse came and said it was time for the procedure. Sarah gave Ivan a slight smile and followed the nurse into the operating room. Ivan stood helplessly in front of the closed door, filled with anger and helplessness. Inside, Sarah lay on the table in a hospital gown. The surgeon asked if she was ready. Another doctor prepared a syringe and told her to relax. She closed her eyes and prepared for the operation. But at the very last moment, just as the procedure was about to begin, she raised her hand and stopped them, saying it had to be halted. Meanwhile, Ivan had convinced himself that if Sarah was determined, he couldn't stop her. Suddenly, the operating room door opened, and Sarah walked out. Ivan jumped up in shock and asked how she had come out so quickly. Were operations that fast nowadays? Sarah acted as if nothing had happened and calmly said she was tired and wanted him to take her home. Ivan confidently agreed. He held her and said he could even fly a fighter jet. He then took the wheel of her red sports car and drove her toward the upscale Longwang district. On the way, while Sarah rested, Ivan's phone rang. A man on the other end said there was an auction that evening at the GN Tower and the big boss wanted him to attend. He also mentioned that the head of the Chamber of Commerce, Lucas, was on their side. Soon they arrived at the Su family's grand mansion. Ivan called out, waking Sarah. She immediately told him to leave before her family saw him, but Ivan noticed her face had turned pale. He offered to walk her to the door, but she refused, telling him not to interfere in her affairs. As she turned, her heel got caught in a crack. Sarah lost her balance and started falling. In that instant, Ivan moved like lightning and caught her just before she hit the ground. Lifting her, he joked that she was extremely clumsy. Sarah turned red with embarrassment and anger and pinched his waist hard, making him yelp in pain. The sudden movement affected her too, and she cried out. Seeing her condition, Ivan picked her up without hesitation and carried her inside the magnificent house, laying her carefully on the sofa. He opened the first aid kit and examined her ankle, which had twisted when she fell. Sarah protested and told him to leave, but he told her not to move. As he was bandaging her ankle, 2 women entered the room: Sarah's mother, Lauren, and her best friend, Sophie. Lauren asked in surprise what was happening. Ivan and Sarah answered together that her ankle had twisted. Sarah then calmly added that her boyfriend had just helped treat the injury. This shocked Ivan, and Lauren was even more stunned. Lauren pointed at the boy in the courier uniform and asked skeptically if this was her boyfriend, demanding to know who he was. After a pause, Sarah quickly corrected herself, saying her ankle had twisted and he was just helping her get home. Lauren calmed down a bit and said she had scared her, reminding her that her wedding was coming up soon. Her future husband was from the influential Chang family, so she couldn't make any mistakes. Ivan, who had been silent, sensed the contempt in her tone and asked what was wrong with being a courier. Lauren bluntly said he was nothing, trying to reach beyond his station, and told him to keep dreaming. The words stung Ivan, and anger appeared on his face. Before things escalated, Sarah intervened and calmly told him to leave, thanking him for his help. Ivan nodded lightly and walked out. As he left, Sophie's gaze lingered on him with a thoughtful expression. After he was gone, Lauren ordered Sophie to help Sarah to her room and told her to clean the floor where that filthy courier had stood. Later in the bedroom, Sophie helped Sarah sit on the bed and immediately asked what her relationship with that boy was. Sarah said there was nothing between them, but Sophie refused to believe it. She said her eyes had revealed everything. Cornered, Sarah admitted she was pregnant with his child. Sophie was so shocked she asked again and wondered why, of all people, a courier. Sarah explained she had drunk too much that night and called it an accident. Sophie asked what she planned to do and reminded her it wouldn't stay hidden from the Chang family for long. Sarah firmly said she had decided to keep the baby. Sophie thought she had gone crazy. Sarah tried to calm her and said she had spoken to Ivan, who promised to take full responsibility. But Sophie disagreed, saying she should come to her senses and that he was not worthy of the Su family heiress. Tired of the lectures, Sarah said she would handle everything herself. She then changed the subject and asked why Sophie had returned to the city. Sophie explained that her grandfather had come to meet an important person in Jiangning and attend an auction, so she had come along. Suddenly, Sophie's expression changed, and she said a brilliant idea had come to her. She leaned in and whispered a plan. If the truth came out, they could simply say the courier had forced himself on her. Sarah rejected the idea in disgust. Meanwhile, after leaving the Su family mansion, Ivan was walking through the elite villa area. He took out his phone and complained that no taxis came here. Suddenly, a black car stopped beside him. A formally dressed elderly man stepped out, greeted him as young master, and introduced himself as Lucas, head of the Kowloon Chamber of Commerce. He said he had come to take him to the evening auction. Ivan pieced everything together, recalling his grandfather had mentioned it, and confirmed. He told Lucas he needed to shower and change before the auction. Lucas promised to arrange everything, and they left in a luxurious black limousine. A short while later, in a large ballroom at the Jian Tower, the auction was in full swing. Ivan stood out, now wearing a perfectly fitted suit instead of his courier jacket. As he stood by the window, he spotted a familiar face. Sophie, Sarah's friend, in a white evening dress, approached mockingly and asked what a courier was doing at this exclusive event. Without waiting for an answer, she assumed he was working part-time. Ivan was about to reply when Sophie grabbed his arm, pulled him aside, and said she needed to talk to him. In a quiet spot, she warned that if he didn't take responsibility for Sarah's child, he would regret it. Ivan was stunned and said he thought Sarah had terminated the pregnancy at the hospital. Sophie snapped that he was wrong. Sarah had decided to keep the baby. Ivan was deeply shocked and muttered Sarah's name, realizing the operation had never happened. Sophie took it as him trying to run from responsibility and warned him again, even pressing her sharp heel hard into his foot. Ivan cried out in pain as Sophie turned and left. Just then, the presenter's voice echoed through the hall, announcing the start of the auction. Sarah's decision to keep the baby still echoed in Ivan's mind, but he decided to finish his work first. A woman in a business suit approached, respectfully calling him young gentleman. She introduced herself as Stella, the new assistant sent by Chairman Lucas. Ivan nodded and followed her to the main trading area. Suddenly, a short, fat man entered and announced that the day's main lot, the new district project, would go to the Chang family. It was Oliver, the Chang family's oldest young master. He warned everyone to show respect or face the consequences. Stella explained that the Chang family was one of the richest in Jiangning and that this project was their main competition. They wanted to use the marriage with the Su family to get out of their difficult situation. Ivan immediately recalled Sarah's engagement and realized Oliver was her future husband. The full picture became clear. Sarah's engagement, her family's troubles, and the fight for this project were all connected. The auctioneer presented the main lot. Without hesitation, Oliver raised his paddle and bid 5 billion. The hall erupted. People said that with the upcoming marriage between the Chang and Su families, no one would dare compete. But just as it seemed decided, Ivan calmly raised his paddle and bid 6 billion. Silence fell over the room. Heated arguments broke out as people wondered who this fearless man challenging the Chang family was. Oliver's face turned pale with rage. He glared at Ivan and shouted, asking who he was and why he was picking a fight. Ivan casually replied that this was an auction where the highest bid wins. What was the problem? Oliver fumed, saying didn't he know the project belonged to the Chang family. Ivan calmly said he had heard everything but it had nothing to do with him. The guests began whispering again. Oliver refused to back down, bidding 7 billion. Ivan immediately countered with 8 billion. Tension rose. Oliver walked straight toward him with his men and shouted that in Jiangning, the Chang family made the rules. In a final desperate bid, he offered 9 billion and challenged Ivan to top it. Ivan simply smiled and added another billion. Oliver's patience snapped. He shouted that Ivan had asked for trouble and threw a powerful punch, but Ivan's speed was astonishing. He easily dodged and delivered a powerful counterpunch to Oliver's face. Oliver screamed in pain and fell to the side. Ivan taunted him, asking if he really thought he could beat him alone. As Oliver lay on the ground, his two bodyguards attacked. Ivan moved with incredible speed, using precise punches and powerful kicks to take them both down in seconds. Oliver struggled to his feet and screamed that by raising a hand against him, Ivan had invited death. Ivan gave a cold smile and said he was the one attacking first. He attacked again, kicking one of Oliver's men so hard he flew and landed on top of Oliver. Both lay unconscious on the ground in utter humiliation. In just a few moments, the fight was over. Ivan looked at the auctioneer and asked if anyone else wanted to bid. The man stammered that no one did. Thus, Ivan won the auction and completed his task. He instructed Stella to sign the documents and transfer the funds, saying he had urgent matters to attend to. Meanwhile, Sophie stood before her grandfather Lucas, who had been serving Ivan. She asked why he had called her so urgently that she missed the auction. Lucas warned her to be careful when their guest arrived and admitted she still didn't understand his temperament. Sophie just laughed and wondered who this important person was that made her influential grandfather so cautious. Then an assistant entered and reported that the auction was over, but the winner was not the Cheng family. Sophie was deeply shocked. She couldn't believe the project had slipped from the Cheng family's hands. Her grandfather calmly said the person they had been waiting for had arrived, and Sophie noticed that this person was acting very arrogantly. It seemed important, so she told her grandfather she was going to call her friend Sarah. As she walked down the corridor, she thought that this loss by the Cheng family could endanger the marriage alliance with the Su family. Lost in these thoughts, she suddenly bumped into Ivan, who was walking toward her. Sophie looked up angrily, recognized him, and scolded the smelly courier for not watching where he was going. But her urgent call was more important, so she turned away and began telling Sarah the important news. After Sophie left, Ivan went to meet Lucas. The elderly man congratulated him respectfully. Ivan confirmed that his work at the auction was done. Casually, he asked who the woman he had met on the way was. Lucas said she was his granddaughter Sophie and added that she was single and often praised Ivan. Seeing the matchmaking attempt, Ivan laughed and said he had no interest. Changing the subject, he asked if Lucas knew Sarah. Lucas explained that the Su family's upbringing was very strict and the girl had a stubborn personality. She didn't get close to people easily, and as far as he knew, she had never had a boyfriend. A slight smile appeared on Ivan's face. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Sarah. He answered and said he had just been thinking about her. Sarah asked if he had time she needed to see him. Ivan immediately agreed and asked for her location. Sensing the urgency, he got up, told Lucas he was leaving, and said he could inform the big boss. Meanwhile, Sarah sat on a bench, looking distant and serious, as if preparing herself for a difficult conversation. Soon, Ivan arrived on his red motorcycle, still in his formal suit. He sat down quietly beside her and got straight to the point. She shouldn't worry about the child, he would take care of both of them. He seriously proposed that if she wanted to get married, they could register anytime. But Sarah remained skeptical. With a slight smile, she doubted he could give her such a life. Ivan calmly looked into the distance and said nothing was beyond his reach. To test him, Sarah raised her hand and showed the watch on her wrist, asking if he knew its value. Without hesitation, Ivan identified the model of Pasha de Cartier 42mm 18-karat pink gold and stated the price, 352,000. Sarah was stunned and asked how much he earned and how many years he would need to save for something like that. Ivan calmly told her not to worry about money. He would never let her or the child lack anything. Sarah rolled her eyes and told him to stop talking big. Then her phone rang. It was her mother, ordering her to come home immediately. Oliver was already waiting to discuss the wedding. Sarah looked at Ivan and asked him to take her home. He smiled lightly and said he would gladly do so. He had her sit on the motorcycle, and they rode off. On the way, Sarah leaned against his back, closed her eyes, and a faint, peaceful smile appeared on her face. Soon they reached the Su family mansion. Ivan walked her to the main door. As soon as they entered, Sarah called out to her mother that she was back. Lauren immediately came and scolded her daughter for staying out so late. She said Oliver had been waiting for a long time. Sarah calmly said she had just gone for a walk. But Lauren's eyes fell on Ivan standing behind her. Unhappily, she asked why she had brought him. She reminded her that her wedding with Oliver was approaching. At that moment, Oliver himself appeared. He greeted Sarah and said he had come to discuss the wedding, introducing himself as the second young master of the Chang family with a fake smile. Sarah tried to postpone the wedding, mentioning that the Chang family had lost the new district project, so their cooperation was incomplete. But Oliver insisted the wedding should happen first and the rest could be discussed later. His real intention was to get close first, then decide whether to help her family. Lauren tried to salvage the situation and persuade her daughter, reminding her that Oliver had promised $1 billion after the wedding. But Sarah cut her off and said she would not marry him. Both Lauren and Oliver were stunned. Sarah then walked to Ivan, took his hand, and announced that not only would she not marry Oliver, but she was also going to be the mother of Ivan's child. Lauren screamed. She grabbed her daughter and demanded an explanation, pointing out that he was just a courier. Sarah pleaded not to force her to marry Oliver and promised that if given time, she would solve the family's difficulties herself. In burning anger, Lauren raised her hand to slap her, but Ivan caught her wrist. Looking into her eyes, he asked what was wrong with being a courier. He said it was truly shameful to marry off one's daughter to an unworthy man for profit. Lauren struggled and screamed for the smelly courier to let go. The atmosphere grew heated. Oliver could no longer hold back. He accused Sarah of shamelessness, saying he hadn't expected this from her. He blamed Ivan and threatened to kill him. Before Oliver could act, Ivan moved like lightning and slapped him hard. Oliver flew and crashed to the ground. Ivan looked at the defeated Oliver and said Sarah was the mother of his child, so she was his woman. Oliver writhed on the ground and screamed that Ivan had dared to hit him. In rage, he grabbed a heavy ashtray from the table and lunged at them, shouting that he would kill them both. Ivan calmly smiled, told Sarah to stay behind him, and she obeyed. As Oliver swung the ashtray, Ivan easily dodged and delivered a powerful punch to his jaw. Oliver flew backward, dropping the ashtray. Ivan grabbed his collar and said he had dared to touch his woman and wouldn't stop there. He rained down heavy punches, ignoring Oliver's screams of pain and pleas for help. As he raised his hand for another blow, a powerful voice shouted, "Stop!" Several influential people entered the room. At the front was an elderly man with a long white beard and a cane. Sarah called out in fear and surprise, "Grandfather!" The family head's presence momentarily silenced everyone. The grandfather scanned the room with a grave expression. He said he had heard everything. He looked carefully at his granddaughter, tapped his cane on the floor, and asked if it was true that she was going to be the mother of this courier's child. Sarah quietly said yes. Relatives angrily protested that this could not be allowed. The grandfather said the only solution was to abort the child. But Oliver, struggling to get up, refused. He shouted that even after an abortion, such a girl would not enter his house. Family members began blaming each other, saying everything was ruined. They had ruined Sarah and now the Su family would be destroyed. Amid all this, Sarah stood silently with a pained expression. Finally, she could no longer endure it and told everyone to be quiet. But the stress took its toll. She cried out in pain, clutched her head, and felt dizzy. Before she fell, Ivan caught her. Holding her, he said not to be afraid he would take her away from here. Seeing this, her family, parents included, stepped forward and demanded the smelly courier let her go, threatening to break his legs. Ivan looked at them with contempt and asked if they even considered themselves human. Without another word, he lifted the unconscious Sarah in his arms and walked out. When her parents tried to block the way, Ivan easily kicked them aside in different directions. At the door, he turned and asked if anyone objected to him taking the girl. Everyone stood helplessly. No one could stop him. Ivan said since there was no objection, he was leaving, and he departed the Su family mansion. He took her to his modern high-rise apartment. Inside, he carefully laid her on the sofa. A card fell from her bag. Ivan picked it up and saw it was her birthday. A slight pang rose in his heart. Despite coming from such a rich family, no one had remembered her special day. About 20 minutes later, Sarah began to regain consciousness. She slowly sat up, rubbing her weak and confused eyes, trying to understand where she was. At that moment, Ivan came out of another room wearing an apron and handed her a plate, saying she was probably hungry. Sarah walked to the table where he had beautifully arranged a full meal. Ivan proudly said his cooking was so good that even Dubai princesses would beg for it. Sarah smiled at his confidence and teased him lightly to stop boasting. They sat at the table, but Ivan said not to say anything bad today. This puzzled her. Before she could ask, Ivan surprised her with a small pink cake with a lit candle. With a confident smile, he wished her a happy birthday. Sarah was completely stunned. Covering her mouth, she asked how he knew. Ivan just smiled smugly and said he was quite impressive. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears and couldn't speak. Ivan offered his shoulder, saying even international supermodels didn't get one like his. At this ridiculous confidence, Sarah burst out laughing. She tried the food and admitted it was really good. Ivan confidently said of course it was. A while later, he told her to make a wish. Sarah closed her eyes, clasped her hands, and silently nodded. After the moment passed, Ivan became a bit serious and asked about her future plans. Sarah reminded him of his promise to support them and asked if he was backing out now. Ivan reassured her he wasn't and asked if she had the courage to marry a courier. Sarah stood up firmly and said yes, if he could give them that life, she definitely had the courage. Ivan made his decision. He said they would register the marriage tomorrow. But then his phone vibrated. He told Sarah he needed to take the call. She nodded. He stepped out onto the balcony. On the other end was Mateo, who said in a panicked voice that danger was approaching. A hired killer named Hydra was heading to Jiangning City to eliminate him. He had last been seen near the Lin family villa. Ivan said he would deal with him tomorrow. Meanwhile, after Ivan left for the balcony, Sarah sat on the sofa eating cake while talking on the phone. Sophie wished her a happy birthday and asked if she was the first to say it. Sarah smiled lightly and said she was second. Ivan had been first. Sophie immediately exploded and demanded to know how she had reconnected with this courier. Sarah sighed and said it was a long story. She also mentioned they had decided to register their marriage tomorrow. Sophie was horrified. She tried to calm her and promised to think of something. She also said she would contact that mysterious powerful person who had won the auction and whom her grandfather knew. Ivan's conversation with Mateo continued. Mateo said that 2 days earlier, the illustrious princess had inquired about his whereabouts. Ivan's face turned serious. He sternly asked if Mateo had told the princess he was in Jiangning. Mateo admitted he had no choice. He knew the princess's temperament and feared the consequences of refusing. This news hit Ivan like a heavy blow. His lighter fell from his hand. He exploded in anger, accusing Mateo of betrayal and demanding an explanation. Mateo tried to smooth things over, saying considering the princess's background, she would be a good match and he should just accept it. But Ivan cut him off and asked when she would arrive. At that moment, his phone vibrated again. He checked the screen irritably. It was a message from Sophie on an unknown number. She offered a partnership, saying working together with the Su family on the new district project would benefit both sides. Almost immediately after, Lucas called. He already knew about his granddaughter's actions and began apologizing. Ivan calmly said it was fine. He then gave clear instructions. Arrange a sniper rifle and give Sarah full control of the new district project. While Ivan was on the balcony, Sarah was resting on the bed. Her phone vibrated. Sophie told her she had contacted the person who won the project and he had agreed to cooperate with the Su family. Most importantly, he had specifically requested that Sarah lead the project. A meeting was set for the next day. Just then, Ivan returned to the room. Seeing her happy face, he asked what had happened. But Sarah, still thinking of him as an ordinary courier, brushed it off, saying it was work stuff he wouldn't understand. Ivan leaned in so close their faces almost touched and said there were many things about him she didn't know. Sarah blushed with embarrassment and asked what he was doing. Agreeing to marriage didn't mean that, but Ivan did nothing more. He took a pillow from the bed and calmly said if she was tired, she should rest. He would sleep on the sofa. As he left, he added that it wasn't good for pregnant women to read lying down. Sarah lay on the bed puzzled, thinking she might have misjudged him. The next morning, Ivan was doing intense workouts on the balcony one-handed push-ups. Sarah, in pajamas, came over, watched with interest, and smiled lightly, asking if he was practicing Toad style. Ivan corrected her, saying it was the coiled dragon arm technique, something she had probably never heard of. He added that it wasn't showy martial arts but real killing techniques and demonstrated a few moves. Looking at Sarah, he repeated what his father had said: martial arts exist to stop fights and protect family. Changing the subject, he said he had prepared breakfast for her. Sarah's heart was touched. She hadn't expected such care. Ivan said she still knew very little about him. After eating, she said she needed to go home to get her residence permit for the marriage registration. Ivan jokingly asked again if she really wanted to marry a courier. As they headed to the motorcycle, Sarah asked if they should meet her parents first. Ivan explained that her family probably wouldn't approve of him. It would be better if they accepted it after the child was born. Sarah asked if he was making her part of his family. Ivan smiled, appraising her looks, figure, and character, but noted that her marital status was a bit disappointing. Sarah asked if he thought he was better than her. Ivan just laughed and told her not to take it so seriously. With slight annoyance, she sat behind him. He told her to hold his waist tightly, and they rode off. Little did they know that Oliver and one of his men were secretly watching them. The fat man said in disgust that the girl had spent the night with the courier. Oliver's face twisted with rage. He gave a cruel order: kill the courier and take the girl to the hotel. His man cracked his knuckles and said he was on it. Meanwhile, as they rode through the city, Ivan spotted a white van in the rearview mirror. He realized they were being followed. He quickly changed plans and told Sarah to go home and get her things while he took care of something. He suddenly accelerated, weaving through traffic to shake them off. He dropped Sarah at a safe place, made sure she was secure, and rode off again on his motorcycle, deliberately drawing their attention. The white van immediately followed him all the way to an upscale area. Ivan intentionally led them to a large modern villa and stopped. He got off the motorcycle and waited. He noticed a man hiding on the second-floor balcony. He realized it was an ambush. Still, Ivan calmly walked toward the house, thinking that since all his enemies were gathered here, he could deal with them at once. He entered the luxurious house and went upstairs. In one room, an open case lay on the table containing exactly the sniper rifle he had requested. Ivan picked up the weapon and mentally praised old Lucas's excellent work. But then something else caught his attention: a blue bra on the nearby bed. Before he could think, a girl wrapped in a towel emerged from the adjacent room. It was Sophie, Sarah's friend. Seeing a man in her room, she demanded an explanation. What was this smelly courier doing in her house? At that exact moment, a red laser dot appeared on Sophie's forehead. Ivan shouted loudly for her to duck. In the same second, a bullet shattered the window. Ivan shoved her and pulled her out of the line of fire at the last moment. They fell onto the bed. Sophie struggled to break free, not understanding. Ivan quietly warned her that if she made noise, she could lose her life. Stay quiet. He got up, picked up the rifle, and while Sophie was still in shock, she asked what was going on. Ivan went to the broken window, aimed the rifle at the villa opposite, and with a light laugh said Hydra's luck had run out. He fired one precise shot. The sniper hiding on the opposite balcony was hit in the head and collapsed. Ivan calmly lowered the weapon and said with slight disappointment that dealing with Hydra had been too easy. But before he could relax, another bullet came from the other side, shattering a second window. Ivan shouted duck again and threw himself over Sophie. They hit the floor as the bullet embedded in the wall right behind them. Lying on the floor with Sophie, Ivan realized there was more than one shooter outside. Thinking quickly, he grabbed clothes from the bed and threw them into the air. The enemy shooter fired at them. At that moment, Ivan took aim and fired his last bullet. It shattered the window and instantly neutralized the second sniper. But it didn't end there. Heavy gunfire started from a third position. Ivan grabbed Sophie, and they rushed behind the sofa while the walls behind them were riddled with bullets. When the gunfire paused briefly, Ivan reached out and picked up a shell casing from the floor. On its base was a six-pointed star, the ammunition of an Eastern European mercenary organization called a buy. He looked at Sophie and asked when she had gotten involved with such dangerous people. Sophie suddenly remembered something. She said an Eastern European boss had tried to buy her company's technology, but she had refused the deal. Meanwhile, the gunfire continued. Ivan pushed her head down again as another bullet whizzed past. They stayed hidden among broken glass and debris, waiting for the right moment. Ivan realized his ammunition was gone. He needed to change tactics. His eyes fell on the sharp glass shards on the floor. He picked up a sharp piece. When there was a brief lull in the shooting, Ivan leapt up and threw the glass shard like a knife with unbelievable speed. It hit its target, and the last sniper screamed in pain. The immediate danger was over. Ivan stood up and calmly told Sophie it was safe now she could get up. Sophie stood and declared that being a courier was just a cover and demanded to know who he really was. In anger, she threatened to tell Sarah everything, but Ivan put a finger to his lips. Quiet. His face became serious as he said there was movement outside. Sophie panicked and asked what they would do. Ivan calmly said everything was under control. Downstairs, 3 of Oliver's men armed with machetes had entered the villa. One recognized Ivan and was surprised to see the courier there. Their leader assumed he was just an ordinary thief. At that moment, Ivan appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked down at the armed men and casually greeted them. With a confident smile, he asked if they were looking for him. The leader pointed his blade at him and said they were Oliver's men. He accused Ivan of messing with their boss's girlfriend. Ivan remained completely calm and simply asked what they planned to do next. Enraged by his attitude, they advanced, hurling threats and insults. But Ivan moved with astonishing speed. With one kick, he knocked one opponent unconscious. Almost instantly, he took down the second. In the blink of an eye, 2 attackers were on the ground. Only the stunned leader remained. He stared at Ivan, unable to comprehend where a courier had gotten such skills. This was no ordinary person, but he refused to accept defeat from a courier. He screamed in rage and lunged with his machete. Ivan easily read his awkward attack and delivered a crushing kick to his hand. The weapon flew away, and he crashed to the ground. All 3 were defeated. Sophie, who had been watching from the stairs, couldn't hold back and screamed in fear. Her scream snapped the leader back to consciousness. Though defeated, he was still aware. Seeing an opportunity, he struggled up and lunged towards Sophie. Before she could react, he grabbed her and pressed the blade to her throat. He warned that if Ivan took one step, he would kill her. But Ivan didn't move at all. With icy indifference, he said to do whatever he wanted. Instead, he slowly walked forward, asking why he hadn't done it yet. The sweating bandit panicked and screamed for him to stop. But the next moment, Ivan closed the distance like lightning. Before the enemy could react, Ivan caught the blade between his thumb and forefinger. The bandit was stunned. The blade couldn't even move. Ivan asked jokingly again why he hadn't done it yet. The bandit's heart sank. He realized he was completely powerless before this man. With a slight movement of his fingers, Ivan snapped the metal blade. Pieces scattered everywhere. Both the bandit and Sophie were stunned. Without giving the enemy time to recover, Ivan grabbed his throat and asked if such a worthless person was even worthy of fighting him. In a desperate struggle for breath, the bandit claimed he was a member of the powerful Black Dragon Society. Ivan showed no interest and indifferently said it made no difference. He slammed the man's head hard against the floor, knocking him unconscious. The man soon regained consciousness and begged Ivan not to commit crimes. These words had no effect. Ivan placed his foot on the man's face. He screamed in pain as blood poured from his mouth. Completely broken, he begged for mercy, saying he had an old mother. In a last attempt to save his life, he revealed that Oliver had already gone to find Sarah. If Ivan didn't hurry, it would be too late. This hit Ivan hard. He exploded in anger, asking why he hadn't said so earlier. He delivered one final powerful blow, knocking the man out completely. At that moment, there was a loud knock at the door and a voice announced, "Police." Ivan quickly told Sophie he was going after Sarah and leaving this matter to her. A short while later, 2 police officers entered. One showed his ID and asked what had happened. Police cars were parked outside. Sophie told them she had been showering when 3 men with knives broke in. Based on her testimony, the police took the 3 attackers into custody. One officer then reported to his superior that they had found 2 bodies in the villa opposite, both snipers who had been stationed there. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself in a bedroom with a furious Oliver. He said he was going to take her by force. Terrified, Sarah told him to leave. This only enraged him more. He smiled and said he had sent men to kill the courier and lunged at her. Oliver pinned the struggling Sarah to the bed. She fought to break free and begged him to let go. He mocked her, saying she could scream all she wanted, no one would come. The courier was busy with his own troubles. But just as he leaned over her, a loud sound rang out, and a heavy blow landed on his face. Oliver flew to the side. Ivan stood at the door. He said it seemed this man no longer wanted to live, having dared to touch his woman. Oliver struggled to his knees, holding his broken face, and angrily asked if the courier knew who his father was. Ivan remained indifferent and said no matter who his father was, he still had to answer for such a son. Oliver jumped to his feet and declared that his father was the richest man in Jiangning. Messing with him meant inviting death. He attacked again, but Ivan easily dodged and kicked him backward. Ivan then turned to Sarah and gently said not to be afraid, everything was over. He pulled her close and assured her that as long as he was there, no one would dare touch her. The beaten Oliver somehow regained consciousness. He got up and left the room, threatening as he went that the courier would regret this. After the danger passed, Sarah asked Ivan what time it was. He was slightly surprised and asked what was wrong. She said there was an important meeting at the company that she had almost forgotten. She asked if he could come with her. A short while later, Sarah and Ivan arrived at the location. As soon as they stepped out, Sarah was told that President Liu was waiting in the conference room. They went inside, and she apologized to the woman in the business suit for being late. It was President Liu, none other than Ivan's assistant, Stella. Seeing him, she was stunned. Ivan quickly put a hand on her shoulder and said they were old classmates. Sarah was deeply shocked to learn that Ivan and this powerful President Liu knew each other. Stella nervously agreed and gestured for them to sit. But before the meeting could start, the door burst open. Sarah's grandfather, her father, and two other Su family members rushed in. Stunned, Sarah asked her grandfather why he was there. Stella politely greeted them. But as soon as their eyes fell on Ivan, their politeness vanished. Irritated, the grandfather asked Sarah why this stranger was here. Sarah reminded him that she was responsible for the project, so it was her decision. This angered her father, Sam, who shouted that when had she gotten the right to speak for the company. Then a man stepped forward, introduced himself as Joshua, and said the project matters should be discussed with him. Sarah's words meant nothing. Sarah tried to object, reminding them the project had been assigned to her. But her father cut her off again and told her to go get water. Sarah's uncle Jack said Joshua should handle it. After all, Sarah was about to get married and should know her place. Finally, Ivan spoke. He asked what these people were doing and reminded them that the project had originally been given to Sarah. This enraged the grandfather even more. He ordered Ivan to shut up and asked what right he had to speak. Joshua mocked Sarah, saying her boyfriend was a delivery man and that he had heard she was going to be the mother of his child. This made the grandfather's anger flare even hotter. Pointing at Ivan, he ordered Sarah to throw this lowly person out immediately. Sarah immediately defended him, saying it didn't matter what a person did for a living as long as they earned honestly. Seeing the situation, Ivan clearly stated once more that only Sarah would lead this project. The old man asked what right a simple courier had to make demands. Ivan walked over to Stella and asked her a favor. He said Sarah was his fiancée and the project should be given to her. Joshua was shocked and objected, saying Sarah was irresponsible and didn't understand company matters. But Stella clearly stated that their company would only cooperate with Sarah. If the Su family didn't agree, they would find another partner. The grandfather demanded to speak to her boss. Stella said their status was not high enough to meet her superiors. Hearing this, the old man broke into a cold sweat, humiliated in front of his own family. Sam apologized to President Liu and promised all demands would be met. Stella said the contract would be signed that day and told the rest of the Su family to leave the room. Sam agreed and led the stunned old man out. One by one, they left. Joshua tried to protest to his father but was quickly silenced and dragged out. As the door closed, Ivan smirked, thinking they had brought this humiliation upon themselves. In another office, The furious Joshua demanded an explanation from his father. But Jack said he already had a plan. When Joshua told Uncle Sam to leave, he stopped them. He said they were all on the same side. Then he revealed a shocking family secret. Sarah was not their real daughter. Joshua and Jack were both stunned. Jack asked if his wife had cheated. But Sam explained that Lauren could not have children, so they had adopted Sarah. Jack asked who her real parents were. Sam said they had probably passed away long ago. All Sarah had left from them was a jade pendant. Jack suggested letting Sarah handle the project for now. Once the work was done, they could find a way to take it from her. Joshua smiled cunningly and agreed. Meanwhile, Ivan stepped out of the office building with a cigarette in hand. He approached the two guards at the door and asked for a lighter. One handed it to him, assuming he had come for an interview. But Ivan said no, he was a courier. The guards laughed loudly. One joked that couriers and guards were eternal enemies. Ivan laughed too, but then he saw both guards suddenly become serious and stand straight. He asked what was wrong. The next moment, the guards stood at attention, and one told the other that President Su was coming. Ivan joked that such a dramatic reaction was needed for one woman. Then Sarah arrived in her sports car. She looked at Ivan and told him to get in. Ivan smiled and said goodbye to the guards, telling them to remember their words they would meet again. The guards stood there confused, unable to understand how an ordinary courier had left with their boss. On the way, Sarah said thanks to Sophie, everything had gone smoothly. She had contacted the mysterious boss behind the new district project. Then she changed the subject and said she had spoken with the Civil Affairs Bureau. They would register the marriage the next morning. She just needed the marriage certificate so the child could have the father's name, and after birth she would give him 300 every month. Ivan laughed and said if she really wanted to support him, 300 was too little. This angered Sarah. She said not to push his luck. For a courier, 300 was more than enough. Soon they arrived at a modern luxury residential complex. Ivan got out and teased Sarah, saying she should remember the way well. As they walked through the complex, his phone rang. He asked Sarah to wait a moment. He was told that the Black Dragon Society had seized a shipment and he needed to deal with it. Then the conversation suddenly changed, and the person asked if he was really going to get married. Ivan was surprised and angry. He demanded to know who had told them. The old man accused him of ignoring so many rich girls to chase after a girl from the Su family. Ivan tried to explain, but the old man cut him off and said his elder sister would come personally tomorrow to settle accounts. Ivan panicked and begged him not to be so cruel. But the call suddenly ended. He quickly hid his emotions and told Sarah it was nothing important. They went home. As soon as they entered the apartment, Sarah noticed a white object on the coffee table and asked what it was. Ivan said it was a postcard. He took off his jacket and asked if she was hungry he would cook. Sarah sat on the sofa holding his jacket, thinking it wasn't bad to have someone caring at home. In the kitchen, Ivan put on an apron and told Sarah to sit he would prepare the food. She thanked him. He joked that it was nothing for his wife and child. After all, he was the man of the house. Sarah had no reply and sat on the sofa with a barely visible smile. The next day, the two went to the Jiangning Civil Affairs Bureau. Ivan and Sarah walked out of the building holding a red marriage certificate. Ivan joked that since he was dressed nicely, they should go out and have some fun. Sarah got angry. She said he was shameless, his behavior hadn't changed even after marriage. She turned and walked away angrily, saying he could do whatever he wanted. Ivan thought he still had to finish the task the old man had given him and soon arrived at the Black Dragon Society headquarters. The Black Dragon Society had once been an ordinary local gang but had grown into a legitimate corporation. Ivan knew, however, that inside it was still steeped in darkness. He decided to see for himself what they were capable of. Ivan entered the building. At reception, two men stopped him and asked what he wanted. Ivan put his hands in his pockets and calmly said he had come to collect a debt. They thought he was a client, but he clarified he was here to collect from a man named Bald Liu. Hearing this, they exploded in anger. They asked who he was and if he knew whose territory he was in. The long-haired man attacked first with a fast kick. Ivan dodged, and the man fell to his knees from the momentum. Before he could recover, a soft kick landed on his face. The bald thug lunged and attacked, but met the same fate. Ivan's powerful strike sent him flying backward. With both men on the ground, Ivan coldly asked the long-haired one if he was ready to take him to Bald Liu now. The next scene was in a luxurious office where the Black Dragon Group's leader, Bald Liu, was relaxing. Beside him was a woman with long purple hair playfully licking drops of red wine off his chest. Suddenly, the office door burst open and Vincent rushed in panicked, saying someone had broken in. Bald Liu shouted, asking why he hadn't stopped him and who had the guts to do this. Before Vincent could explain, a body flew through the door, the same thug from the hall. He crashed in front of Bald Liu's desk. Both Bald Liu and the woman were stunned. Bald Liu jumped up, pulled out a pistol, and pointed it at the door, demanding who had the audacity. Then a black object flew in, a black card. It landed neatly on the table in front of the stunned Bald Liu. He carefully picked it up and recognized the symbol. He shouted that it was the black card of the 10 Elders Association. The beaten Vincent realized they were talking about a terrifying organization, the 10 powerful leaders of the criminal underworld. At that moment, Ivan entered the office and said with light mockery that he was surprised they had heard of this association. Bald Liu screamed, "Ninth Young Master," and finally understood who had come. Without wasting a second, Bald Liu dropped to his knees, bowed his head, and asked what the 9th Young Master commanded. He respectfully offered a lighter. Ivan calmly lit his cigarette. He said he had heard that Bald Liu had recently seized a shipment. Bald Liu panicked and said it was a misunderstanding. Pretending to submit, he promised to return the cargo. But secretly, his hand moved toward the pistol hidden in his belt. Ivan asked if he had heard the saying that when the black card appears, even gods and ghosts must yield. Forced, Bald Liu raised the gun. He said the 9th Young Master had left him no choice, but before he could fire, Ivan flicked his lit cigarette at him. It hit the gun, causing the shot to miss. Ivan calmly said he didn't like guns pointed at him. After neutralizing him, he picked up the black card from the table and said anyone who had ever pointed a gun at him had not survived. In one smooth motion, he used the sharp edge of the card like a blade and slashed it across Bald Liu's throat. The gang boss collapsed to the floor. Seeing this horrifying scene, the purple-haired woman screamed in terror. Vincent was frozen, staring at his dead boss's body. Hearing the commotion, other gang members gathered at the door and shouted that their leader had been killed. Ignoring the chaos, Ivan looked at the terrified Vincent and gave him two options: hand over the cargo and become the new boss, or hand over the cargo and die like Bald Liu. Vincent and the other thugs immediately bowed their heads and declared complete loyalty to the 9th Young Master. Ivan accepted their loyalty with satisfaction and calmly ordered them to take him to the cargo. And so, his task was completed. Outside the Black Dragon Group headquarters, a car stopped. Oliver got out, accompanied by a thug on crutches, filled with rage. He declared that today, no matter what, he would kill Ivan. He marched toward the entrance, shouting that he wanted to meet the head of the Black Dragon Society. He said if Boss Old Liu would take care of that smelly courier for him, he was willing to pay any price. Meanwhile, Ivan stood before the gathered gang members, appointing Vincent as the new leader. Suddenly, the door burst open and Oliver rushed into the office shouting for Boss Liu. He looked around and irritably asked where the old boss was. Vincent calmly replied that Old Liu was no longer with them. Now Vincent ran the Black Dragon Society. Oliver congratulated the new leader and got to business. He needed someone killed and was willing to pay 50 million. Hearing the amount, Vincent's heart was tempted. He asked who the target was. Oliver said it was just a courier. Vincent laughed. A simple delivery man for that much money seemed wasteful. But the furious Oliver said it was no joke. That courier had beaten him and stolen his woman, so he had to die. Vincent saw it as an opportunity. As the new boss, he had landed his first big deal. He said there was no need to worrying about a courier, he would take care of it. Oliver insisted on coming along. Vincent readily agreed and signaled his men, announcing they would take revenge for Oliver. The story returned to the food delivery center, where Ivan had returned to his daily work. His colleague told him he had been missing for several days and the boss was looking for him. Ivan calmly said he would deliver a few orders first, then meet the boss. He rode off on his red motorcycle. But on the way, a black van suddenly took a sharp turn and blocked his path. The van door opened, and a furious Oliver stepped out holding a heavy metal pipe. He looked at Ivan with hatred and said he probably hadn't expected to meet so soon. Blinded by rage, he swung the pipe forward, wanting to bring him to his knees. But Ivan calmly dodged his clumsy attack. As soon as Oliver lost his balance, Ivan flicked his burning cigarette precisely into his mouth. Without giving him time to recover, Ivan delivered a powerful knee strike to his stomach, followed by an elbow to his back. He said if Oliver bowed, he would let him. The series of blows was devastating, and Oliver fell to his knees. He screamed for Vincent to help. At that moment, Vincent and his men emerged from the van. The new boss lit a cigar and commented that he had wanted to know if all couriers were this tough. Oliver said he didn't want Ivan to die quickly, he wanted to torture him slowly. Vincent approached Ivan and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. But as soon as Ivan turned, Vincent's smugness vanished, replaced by terror. Ivan angrily asked who this was. He grabbed his head and slammed his face onto the burning cigar. Standing over him, Ivan asked mockingly if he had just gotten the position and already become so arrogant. Vincent quickly apologized and promised that if he had known who he was dealing with, he would never have come. Completely confused, Oliver ordered Vincent to attack Ivan again. But fearing Ivan's further anger, Vincent immediately switched sides and kicked Oliver with full force. The powerful blow sent Oliver flying and crashing hard. Ivan placed his foot on him and warned that this was his last chance. If he valued his life, he should stop bothering him. He added that Sarah was his wife and to stay away from her. This time, he simply broke his arm. After settling the matter, Ivan took out his phone and noted with annoyance that he was late again. After Ivan left, Oliver got up and shouted at Vincent, asking why he hadn't dealt with that courier. But Vincent replied that the person Oliver called a simple courier was someone he would never dare to insult. Meanwhile, Ivan continued delivering orders and soon arrived at an old residential building. Carrying a food bag, he walked through the dark and dirty corridor, thinking to himself how neglected this place was. Finding the correct apartment, he knocked on the door. A disheveled man with messy blue hair and a dangerous look opened it. While the man was looking for money, Ivan's senses sharpened. Something felt wrong. His suspicion was confirmed when he glanced inside and saw a terrified girl in torn clothes. Before she could make a sound, another man inside struck her on the head, and she collapsed to the floor. Seeing this, Ivan's attitude changed instantly. The blue-haired man quickly handed over the money and tried to send him away, then slammed the door shut. Inside, the criminals were panicking. They knew the courier had seen everything. Standing in the corridor, Ivan rubbed his head in frustration, wondering why he kept running into this kind of trouble. But his thoughts were interrupted when the door burst open and the blue-haired man lunged at him with a knife. Despite the sudden attack, Ivan blinked and delivered a kick that sent the attacker flying backward, the weapon dropping from his hand. Standing at the doorway, Ivan said irritably that even a routine delivery required him to get his hands dirty. The second kidnapper realized this was no ordinary courier but a trained fighter. In rage, he grabbed a machete and advanced with the intent to kill. But the protagonist easily caught his wrist, stopping the attack, and said mockingly how useless his skills were. He then delivered a powerful elbow to the man's face, knocking him to the ground. The man immediately screamed for help. After neutralizing both, Ivan closed the door and turned to the girl lying inside. As he entered the room, he paused for a moment. A girl was tied hand and foot on the bed, crying for help. He approached her, untied her bonds, and asked if she could walk. When she said yes, he draped his jacket over her shoulders. He told her he had already called the police and offered to inform her family so they could come. The girl agreed. He then said he would go outside and tie up the criminals so they couldn't escape, and handed her the phone. Ivan stood before the two bound kidnappers, whom he had tied back to back. He said this was the punishment for what they had done. At that moment, the rescued girl approached and thanked him, introducing herself as Emily. After calling her family, Emily suddenly looked stunned while holding the phone. An incoming call appeared. She handed the phone to Ivan. He answered in a business-like tone, but an angry woman's voice came through, scolding him for being so shameless as to get married without telling the family. Ivan's face turned pale. He realized it was his elder sister. She ordered him to come meet her and bring his bride. The call ended abruptly. Ivan grumbled that she always hung up without warning, as usual. Just then, the door opened and an elderly man entered with 2 police officers. Emily shouted with joy, calling out to her father and running toward him. Meanwhile, Ivan stood near the neutralized criminals. Her father hugged her tightly and asked anxiously if she was hurt. Emily quickly reassured him that she was fine and pointed to Ivan, saying he was the one who had saved her. The police took the bound criminals into custody, and the senior officer ordered them to be taken away. Ivan added that he had neutralized them. The girl's father approached him, thanked him for saving his daughter, and asked if he had really handled the attackers himself. He was quite impressed and thought it was unexpected to meet such a capable warrior disguised as a courier. He introduced himself as Tyler, handed Ivan a business card, and said he owed him a great favor and to contact him if he ever needed help. Ivan took the card. It read White Tiger School of Martial Arts. He politely said he would visit if the opportunity arose. Tyler tried to persuade him and offered him a job at his martial arts school, but Ivan gracefully declined. As they left, Tyler thought to himself what remarkable talent this young man possessed. On the street outside, the protagonist walked toward his motorcycle while the police loaded the kidnappers into the car. He thought this chapter was closed. It was time to find Sarah. He started his motorcycle and rode off. The story shifted to the Sioux Group skyscraper. In Sarah's office, a man in a blue suit named Peter entered and said he had heard about her troubles and immediately returned from abroad. He tried to comfort her, but Sarah rejected his offer, saying the company already had a solution and she didn't need his help. He persisted, saying he had rejected countless girls because only she held a place in his heart. Sarah ordered him to stay away, but Peter grabbed her hand and begged her to be with him. In response, Sarah slapped him hard across the face and told him to have some shame. She was already married and pregnant. Shocked, Peter held his cheek and refused to believe it, saying she was lying. At that exact moment, the office door opened and Ivan walked in carrying 2 food containers. Peter scolded him for entering without knocking, saying he was discussing business with President Sue. Sarah then took Ivan's hand and formally introduced him as her husband. As she said it, she felt a warmth inside and smiled, leaning slightly toward him. Peter was stunned and asked if this was really her husband. Ivan stepped forward and said he and his wife wanted to have lunch alone. Peter tried to object, but the protagonist calmly repeated himself, and the 2 turned their backs on him. After he left, Sarah told Ivan to inform reception not to let strangers in or employees would be fired. After the unwanted guest departed, Ivan placed the food on the table and smirked, saying the guy turned out to be quite weak. While eating, Sarah said that technically Peter was not her rival and there were no feelings between them. Ivan smiled and said he understood. But as Sarah began eating, something occurred to the protagonist. He playfully closed the lid of her container. Annoyed, Sarah asked what he was doing. He teased her that since there were no feelings between them, why should he feed her his food? Sarah exploded, saying he was the one who got her pregnant, so feeding her was his responsibility. After tasting the food, she admitted he was an excellent cook. Ivan was pleased. He then suggested she quit her courier job and said he would open a restaurant for her. Sarah pouted slightly and asked if he had ever cooked for any other woman before. Ivan reassured her that he only cooked for one person. But since there were no feelings between them, it meant he was cooking for the child in her belly. Sarah didn't like that answer. She changed the subject and asked why he wasn't wearing his work uniform. Ivan smiled slyly and said that during one delivery he had to rescue an attractive girl and gave her his jacket. Hearing this, Sarah felt a pang of jealousy. In anger, she told him to get out and go to his beauty. When the door closed, Ivan panicked, remembering that pregnant women should not be stressed. He tried to coax her. From inside, the still annoyed Sarah told him to just go to work. Her irritation was interrupted when her phone rang. It was a message from Ivan saying to eat in peace he was going to earn money for baby formula. Reading it softened her mood. She replied that she would go to his place that evening and he should come with her. When Ivan asked what his role would be, Sarah clearly said he was the child's father. Ivan looked at his phone and smiled, thinking she was stubborn and didn't want to call him husband directly. He then rode off on his motorcycle. There was still a lot of work to do that day. That same evening, a red sports car stopped in front of the modern Sioux family home. Ivan entered with Sarah. Lauren immediately asked why she had brought that thing home again. Sarah took Ivan's hand and said they were already married, so there was no problem bringing her husband home. Lauren was deeply shocked. She couldn't believe Sarah had married a courier. She wondered if her daughter had lost her mind. But Sarah firmly said she knew exactly what she was doing. Their argument was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah's father Sam and brother Joshua. Joshua ordered them to stop fighting during family dinner. Suddenly, he sided with his sister, saying she had the right to marry whoever she wanted. To cool the atmosphere, Sam told Sarah to go upstairs and change before dinner. As soon as Sarah and Ivan went upstairs, Lauren confronted Joshua, asking why he had allowed his sister to marry this trash. Joshua smiled cunningly and revealed his plan. He had already called Oliver, who was on his way. A short while later, a guest arrived. Joshua and his parents seated him at the table. It was Oliver. He looked displeased and asked why he had been called so urgently. Joshua told him to wait. At that moment, Sarah and Ivan came downstairs. Seeing Oliver at the family table, Sarah stopped, confused about why he was there. Lauren angrily said she should see there was a guest. Sarah asked why he was at the family dinner. Ignoring her, Lauren told her to sit next to Oliver. When Sarah and Ivan approached the table, they saw only one chair was empty. Lauren said coldly that not everyone had a place at the Sue family dining table. Ivan asked why Oliver had a seat but he didn't. Lauren dismissed him with a smirk, telling him to look at himself first. Sarah's father Sam finally lost patience and ordered everyone to start eating. Whoever didn't have a seat could sit on the floor. Sarah turned to Ivan, gave him the last chair, and said she would stand. This enraged Sam. He slammed his palm on the table and asked if she intended to rebel against him. But the protagonist didn't argue. He quietly walked behind the nervous Oliver and stared at him heavily. Suddenly, to everyone's astonishment, Oliver, drenched in sweat, jumped up in panic and offered his chair to Ivan, respectfully calling him brother. Lauren objected that Ivan was not worthy of their table and shouldn't be given the chair. But Oliver ignored her, saying if brother Ivan wasn't worthy of the table, then he himself was even less worthy. Ivan sat down. He then turned to Sarah and said the mother of his child should sit. She was pregnant and shouldn't stand. The rest of the family watched in confusion, unable to understand why Oliver was being so submissive. Joshua saw his plan backfiring. He placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder and said he had a surprise. Ivan ignored the two of them and calmly told Sarah to focus on eating. Everyone raised their glasses. At that moment, the irritated Oliver whispered to Joshua, asking for an explanation. Joshua quietly told him he had drugged Sarah's wine. Oliver was shocked. In panic, he grabbed Joshua's hand. He realized this was a trap meant to force Ivan to kill him. Panicking, he shouted loudly that Sarah shouldn't drink the wine, it was spiked. Sarah was stunned. Oliver pointed at Joshua in fear and announced that he had planned it. Sarah's anger exploded at her own brother's actions. She stood up and threw the entire glass of wine in his face, calling him shameless. The drenched and humiliated Joshua was terrified. This attempt to harm his own wife ignited a terrible rage in Ivan. His eyes turned red. He delivered a crushing blow to the scoundrel's face. Standing over the unconscious Joshua, he said that if he ever touched his wife again, he would lose his life. He was disgusted with his own family. Sarah said this house was filthy and left with Ivan. As they left, her parents rushed to Joshua and anxiously asked about his condition. A short while later, as they were leaving, Sarah asked Ivan the question that had been on her mind for a long time. Why was Oliver so afraid of him? But Ivan dodged the question with a vague answer, saying some people were stubborn and only behaved properly after a good slap. Sarah rolled her eyes and called him a show-off again. She reminded him that fitting into her family with his background would be extremely difficult. But Ivan calmly said that her family's rules meant nothing compared to his own family's rules. Their conversation was interrupted by his phone vibrating. Ivan's confident face instantly changed to panic. It was a message from a contact named Claire saying she had arrived and would be there in 10 minutes. When they returned home, Sarah noticed his anxious state and asked who had scared him so much. Ivan told her his elder sister had arrived. He warned Sarah not to say anything reckless because his family had many rules. Sarah was skeptical, but Ivan said she would understand soon and warned her again to be careful. When they entered the apartment, a woman was already sitting on the sofa smoking. Ivan immediately put on a cheerful smile and greeted his elder sister, saying he had missed her very much. But Claire, his iron-willed elder sister, remained unmoved. She ignored his greeting and commanded coldly, "Kneel." Sarah was utterly shocked when Ivan dropped to his knees without hesitation. Claire then turned her cold gaze to Sarah and gestured for her to come closer. Before Sarah could react, Ivan stepped in and explained that Sarah was pregnant and could not kneel. The woman paused for a moment. She calmly extinguished her cigarette and checked Sarah's pulse. After confirming she was indeed pregnant, she suddenly withdrew her hand. She stood up abruptly and delivered a powerful kick to Ivan, who was still kneeling, sending him flying. In anger, she scolded him for learning so many bad habits while living abroad for years. Claire stood over him and announced that he would be punished first, then they would talk. Seeing this, Sarah immediately rushed forward and stood in front of Ivan with her arms spread, saying she didn't know their family rules but hitting someone without understanding was wrong. Claire listed 3 reasons. First, getting married without informing the elders. Second, getting a woman pregnant before marriage. And third, choosing an unworthy partner for himself. Sarah's anger flared at the third point. She demanded to know what kind of woman would be considered worthy for her brother. Claire began listing the names of all the high-status women the family had chosen for him, all of whom he had rejected. Seeing the situation worsening, Ivan begged his sister to stop provoking Sarah. She was pregnant. But Sarah was no longer in the mood to listen. She suddenly said to stop the act. With a cynical smile, she said she understood everything now. Ivan had staged this whole show, pretending to be from a powerful family to make himself look important. She said she was disgusted by their childish behavior and didn't want her child to grow up in such an environment. After that, she said she would contact him after the child was born and left the house, leaving Ivan with his sister. When Ivan tried to follow her, his sister shouted loudly for him not to chase after her. She then explained that she had come on the old man of Jianning's orders. She took out a small object and said it was a token. Claire said that many years ago, the head of the Kong Valley had lost a child in Jianning City, and that child had possessed a similar pearl. Ivan was a dragon, and the lost girl was a phoenix. A marriage contract had been made for them even before they were born. Ivan reminded her that he was already married. But Claire ignored him, saying he would not dare disobey the old man's direct order. Meanwhile, Sarah went to Sophie's place, disappointed by Ivan's foolish act. Sophie asked if it was just a show. Sarah found it impossible. She wondered why someone as important as the holy maiden of the Miao clan would be interested in a courier. But Sophie guessed that if Ivan's sister's words were true, his identity must be complicated. Sarah was surprised that her friend was suddenly defending Ivan and asked why. Sophie quickly denied it, but Sarah didn't believe her. She grabbed her hand and playfully tried to make her spill the truth. Then, turning serious, she asked how the meeting with that mysterious boss would happen. Sophie said her grandfather had become very secretive lately, but she promised to get the contact information of that person for Sarah. At that moment, there was a knock on the bedroom door. Sophie opened it. It was Peter. Sophie asked in surprise what he was doing at her house. Peter said he knew the person they were talking about and offered to arrange a meeting. Sophie asked if he really knew that influential person who had invested 10 billion in the new district project. Peter confidently said yes. He said his grandfather had introduced him and he could easily arrange the meeting. The next day, Ivan stood on the balcony of his apartment thinking about Sarah's stubbornness. She wasn't answering his calls. His phone rang. He hoped it was Sarah but was disappointed. It was a message from Emily saying she had washed the jacket and needed the address to return it. Ivan replied curtly that it wasn't necessary and she could throw it away. After dealing with that, he picked up the golden pearl engraved with the dragon and wondered where to start looking for the lost girl. Then another call came. It was Mateo. He reported that their comrade Ironhead had passed away. Ivan was deeply shocked and demanded an explanation. Mateo said Ironhead had drowned from exhaustion after saving many people from the water. Meanwhile, in her room, Emily, wrapped in a towel, looked sadly at her phone, wondering if she would ever see her savior again. Her father Tyler entered and asked the reason for her sadness. He told her there was a birthday party the next day for young Master Jeffrey and she should go in his place. Jeffrey had recently survived drowning, and the party was to celebrate that. But Emily refused, saying the man who had been saved hadn't even thanked his savior and had called him a thug instead. Her father changed the subject and asked if she had contacted the courier who saved her. Emily said yes, but added that he had even refused to take back his jacket. Tyler was disappointed, thinking there would be no special connection between them. The story moved to the entrance of the luxurious Station Grand Hotel. The protagonist arrived in a gray van, looking extremely handsome in a suit. Four men greeted him respectfully: Ghost, Blind Man, Smiling Buddha, and young Master Lee. Ivan said they should go inside, and his men followed him into the hotel. As their group entered, a white luxury car pulled up outside. Emily stepped out and noticed Ivan's back, which looked very familiar. Butter asked what was wrong, but she brushed it off, saying she must have been mistaken. Inside, the party was in full swing. Jeffrey was thanking the guests, saying he had survived the recent incident only by luck. On this occasion, a massive 9-tier cake was brought out, but a female reporter stepped forward and asked about the person who had died saving Jeffrey. Hearing the question, Jeffrey's anger exploded. He shouted at security, asking who had let a reporter into the private party. He ordered the bodyguards to seize her, and they immediately pounced. While the men held her, the furious Jeffrey brutally kicked the reporter. He shouted that he had survived only by his own power. Emily and her companions were stunned. She said Jeffrey's behavior was disgusting, but her companion warned her not to interfere. Jeffrey continued stomping on the woman on the ground, saying he would teach her manners. He was about to deliver another cruel blow when suddenly another foot appeared in front of his face at incredible speed. A powerful strike sent the shocked Jeffrey flying across the room. He crashed to the floor and rolled all the way to the stage. Looking up, he saw the protagonist standing there, with his 4 men behind him. Emily realized with joy that this was the man who had saved her. Jeffrey struggled to his feet and glared at the uninvited guests. He ordered the remaining people to kill them all. The bodyguards charged forward, shouting that they had dared to cause trouble in the family's territory. But Ivan's men displayed astonishing skill. One after another, they defeated their opponents with powerful strikes. Smiling Buddha sent one guard flying with a knee. Young Master Lee easily neutralized his opponent. Ghost kicked one guard in the face. Blind Man handled the last enemy. Soon, all of Jeffrey's subordinates were on the ground, while Ivan and his team stood indifferently amid the chaos. The terrified Jeffrey stammered and asked who they were. Ivan pulled up a chair and finally revealed his purpose. He said his brother was the man known as Ironhead, who had given his life to save Jeffrey. Taking a drag from his cigarette, he announced that he was extremely angry that Jeffrey had dared to call his heroic brother trash. Jeffrey screamed that his life was more valuable than others because he had power and called for security again. At his signal, a new squad in black suits entered the hall, but Ivan didn't move. He gave an ultimatum: if Jeffrey went to his brother's grave, kowtowed 3 times, and publicly apologized, he would let him go. Jeffrey angrily refused and ordered the new guards to kill Ivan and his men. Before they could act, the protagonist moved forward at incredible speed. He picked up a chair and announced that Jeffrey had missed his chance. With full force, he smashed it into Jeffrey's face. The crushing blow sent him flying into the massive cake. Covered in cream and spitting blood, he fell to his knees. Ivan stood over him and said he had missed his chance. He delivered another blow, knocking him completely unconscious. Looking at the unconscious man, Ivan said how arrogant yet so pathetic. At that moment, 2 men entered the hall. One was Joseph, whom Jeffrey recognized as his father. He cried out for help. The furious Joseph pointed at the protagonist and ordered his companion Old Son to eliminate everyone. Old Son agreed without hesitation. Emily's companion warned her that Old Son was a high-level master. Old Son lunged forward, saying he would teach the arrogant youth a lesson, and delivered a powerful strike. But the attack was stopped before it reached its target. Someone's hand firmly caught his fist. Old Son was stunned that it had been stopped so easily. It was Smiling Buddha. Ivan gave his man permission to play a little. Smiling Buddha delivered a crushing blow, grabbed Old Son's head, and slammed his face into the hall floor. The shocked Joseph could only watch as his most powerful bodyguard was taken down in moments. The beaten old son recognized the technique and said it was the diamond palm of the Genchen clan. Joseph immediately smiled and said since they were all from Genchen, this matter should be resolved peacefully. But the protagonist remained firm. He reminded him that he had already stated his conditions. Jeffrey had refused them. Joseph said he had heard Iron Head was just a car mechanic and offered 1 million yuan. Ivan's anger flared. He kicked the chair he was sitting on and announced that his brother's life had no price. He walked up to Joseph and asked where a family with so much money got the arrogance to buy a mechanic's life. Joseph laughed and said they had no shortage of money. Buying a mechanic's life meant nothing to them. Ivan asked if he believed he could bankrupt the entire Joseph family right now. Lee contacted the necessary people and ordered that all of the Joseph family's business in the city be stopped immediately. Joseph still didn't believe it, thinking they were just putting on a show. But then his assistant ran in and announced that all partners had withdrawn cooperation and factories had been ordered to close. Moreover, behind all this was the Li clan of southern China, whose wealth rivaled entire provinces. Hearing this, Li stepped forward, adjusted his glasses, winked, and confirmed he was the representative of that clan. Joseph realized who he had offended. Panicking, he began begging for forgiveness. In an attempt to save himself, he forced his son to his knees. But Ivan had no interest in apologies. He confidently placed his foot on Jeffrey's back. The screaming Jeffrey begged his father for help. Joseph said his younger brother held a high position in the army and mutual destruction would benefit no one, but Ivan remained calm. He turned to Blind Man and told him to make the call. Blind Man immediately dialed and ordered an investigation into the Joseph family in the city. Ivan challenged them to investigate if they dared. He then turned and left. As they departed, the desperate Jeffrey begged his father to contact his uncle. Joseph promised he would. A short while later, his phone rang. It was his brother. Joseph answered with a smug smile, but his brother immediately said, "Do you want to die?" He told him that Jeffrey had insulted a senior military figure, causing his own posting to be suspended and an investigation to begin. Meanwhile, the story moved to the cemetery. The protagonist and his men stood before a grave bearing the name Iron Head. Ivan ordered Jeffrey to kneel before the grave. He then stepped onto the stone platform and placed his foot on Jeffrey's head. Jeffrey tried to resist, but Ivan ignored him and pressed down hard, forcing him to apologize to his brother. The force made Jeffrey's face slam into the ground. Afterward, all the men stood in a line holding incense and cigarettes, silently praying. While Ivan and his group were bidding their final farewell to their fallen brother, Sarah also arrived at the same cemetery to visit her late grandmother's grave. She knelt and began talking about her life, saying she had gotten married and was pregnant. She recalled her grandmother's words not to trust men. But then she said she had met a decent man who had helped her secure the project. She placed a plate of fruits and cookies on the altar, her grandmother's favorites. Suddenly, heavy rain began to fall. Sarah apologized to her grandmother, saying she had to leave because of the weather but would return. She then walked toward the road where a black car was waiting for her. Peter called out for her to get in quickly. In the car, Sophie sat beside Sarah, complaining about the rain and ordering Peter to drive faster. Suddenly, the car braked hard. A massive motorcycle had blocked the road. The angry Peter asked who had the guts to block the road. Sophie noticed the luxury cars. A whole row of expensive black cars was parked outside. Bodyguards in suits rushed out with umbrellas and walked toward Ivan in the rain. On the way, Ivan instructed Lee to handle a matter. Ironhead had left behind a daughter. Meanwhile, Peter looked out the window and wondered what crime boss had come to the cemetery with such pomp. Sarah recognized Ivan but couldn't understand why her courier husband was surrounded by such wealth and respect. Then Lee bowed and opened the car door for Ivan in the rain. Sophie drew Sarah's attention and clearly pointed out that this was the man opening the door for Ivan. Peter was clearly stunned. He said the man looked like Lee, the heir of a powerful clan in southern China. As soon as Ivan got in the car, he ordered them to go to Ironhead's house first. In the other car, Sophie wondered why such an influential person would open the door for an ordinary courier. She suggested calling Sarah, but she refused. She was certain it couldn't be true. Finally, Sarah decided her eyes must have been deceived by the heavy rain. Peter assured her that everything was arranged. The influential person was ready to meet. He promised to arrange Sarah's meeting with that person the day after tomorrow. The story moved to an ordinary neighborhood in the city. An elderly man was sleeping on a bench when Ivan's car stopped nearby. Ivan and his four subordinates got out and confirmed it was the correct address. The protagonist approached the sleeping old man, woke him, and politely asked if Ironhead had lived here. At first the old man didn't understand. Ivan explained he was looking for a man named Shu. Upon hearing the name, the old man pointed to apartment 326 on the third floor. As Ivan's men entered the building, the old man said sadly that the deceased's cousins and his wife had taken over the house. Ivan's group walked down the corridor and saw a little girl sitting alone on the ground. Lee was angry that someone had dared to seize Ironhead's property. Ivan asked if this was Shu's house. The girl had a bruise on her face. She looked up fearfully and said her papa was not home. He had gone somewhere far away. Lee realized this was Ironhead's daughter. He was stunned. Ivan gently stroked the girl's head and asked why she wasn't inside. She said her uncle and aunt wouldn't let her stay in the apartment. She pointed to a cardboard box in the corridor and said her aunt had told her that was her new home. Hearing this, Lee's anger exploded. He kicked open the apartment door. Inside, a fat man and woman were eating heartily. Shocked by the sudden intrusion, the fat man slammed his fist on the table and asked who they were. The protagonist asked when this house had become their property. He asserted his right to the house and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. In response, Ivan called him a beast and delivered a powerful knee strike to his stomach. The blow sent him flying into the dining table, food scattered everywhere. Ivan calmly took the little girl's hand. He ordered Smiling Buddha to teach them a lesson. Smiling Buddha and Ghost advanced with threatening smiles. The fat man begged for mercy after the beating, but Ivan ignored them and turned to the girl, asking her name. She looked up and said her name was Megan. Lee expressed concern. Leaving her in this condition, the child might die. The protagonist bent down and invited Megan to come live with him and his brothers. Megan agreed. Ivan suggested Lee raise her, but he panicked, saying he didn't know how to raise children. At that moment, Megan tugged at Ivan's jacket and looked at him with pleading eyes. Lee suggested Megan call Ivan Godfather. The child immediately hugged him and happily called him Godfather. Ivan smirked and said he had become a father just days after getting married. The next day, the protagonist brought Megan to his apartment. He prepared breakfast for her and told her to eat plenty because he had to take her to school afterward. While eating, he took a photo of the food and messaged Sarah, inviting her to come home for dinner. But Sarah replied that she wouldn't eat. He offered to bring food to her. She refused that and added that he should stop trying to find her. Ivan sighed heavily and commented on her temperament. Then Megan announced she had finished eating. Ivan smiled and said they should change clothes and go to school. Soon they arrived at a prestigious school. In the corridor, Ivan told Megan that Lee had arranged her admission here. It was the best place in the area, so she should study hard. They went to the office where the director greeted them and called him sir. He introduced himself as Principal Dan and introduced the teacher standing beside him. The teacher turned around. It was Emily, the same girl Ivan had saved before. Seeing him, she was stunned with joy and said it really was him. She then looked at Megan and asked if this was his daughter. Ivan stroked Megan's head and confirmed it. Principal Dan suggested that since they knew each other, Emily could take the child to class. Emily agreed. The protagonist said he was leaving Megan in her care because he had to go to work. In the corridor, he waved. Megan waved back and said goodbye, calling him Godfather. Ivan turned, gave a warm smile, and promised to pick her up after school. After he left, Emily asked Megan if he was her biological father. Megan said he was her godfather. Emily smiled and took Megan to class. Outside, the protagonist sat on his motorcycle and lit a cigarette. He thought becoming a father wasn't as easy as it seemed. Suddenly his phone rang, and a woman's loud voice called him a scoundrel and asked if he missed her. Ivan was startled. He called her the eldest princess and asked where she had gotten his number. On the other end, the red-haired woman lit a cigarette and said since he was so stubborn, she had to come soften him herself. Ivan tried to stop her, saying he was married and his wife would be very unhappy with her presence. He was about to accuse her of threatening to interfere in his life, but before he could speak, she hung up. He grumbled that, as always, he couldn't get a word in. The next morning, he dropped Megan at school. On the way back, he decided to warn Sarah about the eldest princess's arrival. He didn't want to stress her during pregnancy, so he sent a message: if any woman comes looking for him, ignore her. Ivan lit a cigarette and sighed heavily, saying women were really troublesome. Checking his schedule, he saw one delivery might be late and hurried off. By afternoon, his route took him to a wealthy area where he stopped in front of a grand mansion. Looking at the magnificent building, he thought it was truly luxurious. He rang the doorbell and announced the food delivery. The door opened and both froze for a moment. Sarah, his wife, stood before him. Ivan gave a tense smile and said, "What a coincidence. An event was happening inside." A woman asked Sarah who was at the door. She replied it was just a courier. Ivan handed the order to the woman. When she asked if they knew each other, he lied that they were classmates. But Helen was surprised. She had studied with Sarah too but didn't remember him. Ivan quickly introduced himself as John and explained he had been an unremarkable student, so it was normal not to remember. But a man in a suit laughed and said he didn't remember anyone by that name either. He looked down at Ivan and said their old classmate had turned out to be an ordinary courier. Turning to Sarah, he asked why such an influential woman was talking to a courier. He said the gap between elite and lower classes was huge and associating with such people only brought trouble. To humiliate Ivan, he took out his wallet and offered money as if giving to a beggar. With a satisfied smirk, he said couriers needed tips and this was more than enough. Ivan swallowed his anger and took the money. The man asked why he hadn't left yet. Ivan forced a tense smile and thanked him. At that moment, another girl asked if the pizza had arrived, and the man's face changed completely. He addressed her as goddess. But the girl, Emily, ignored him and looked at the courier in surprise, recognizing him. The protagonist greeted her awkwardly. Emily happily told everyone he was her savior. She grabbed his hand and invited him inside. Ivan tried to refuse, saying he had deliveries. But the man interfered again and asked what was the need to stop a courier. This angered Emily, and she scolded him. Ivan apologized and left. Emily ran after him and said she would give him a ride since she had come without a car. The man immediately offered his Porsche, saying motorcycles were dangerous. Meanwhile, Sarah watched silently as her husband talked to a beautiful teacher. The protagonist looked at her, but Sarah turned away and said he didn't need her permission. Emily sat behind Ivan on the motorcycle and said she needed to return to school. Soon the two rode through the city streets. After they left, the arrogant man smiled and invited Sarah inside to eat. But Sarah directly refused, saying she had important work at the company and left immediately. On the way, Ivan rode at high speed with Emily holding on to him. He asked if the speed was too fast. The girl shyly pressed closer to his back and said the speed was normal and actually felt good. But the moment was suddenly broken. A red sports car cut them off, forcing Ivan to brake hard. It was Sarah. She rolled down the window and firmly told Emily to get into her car. Ivan immediately agreed and lied that something urgent had come up. Before getting into the car, Emily asked if he was free this weekend because she wanted to treat him to dinner. Ivan panicked and said he had work and they could arrange it later. He quickly rode away. Racing on his motorcycle, he thought dealing with women was extremely difficult. That evening, Ivan walked through the apartment complex courtyard holding Megan's hand. He asked if she was hungry and said he would cook as soon as they got home. But when they opened the door, he froze. A pair of women's heels lay on the floor. Then the bathroom door opened and a woman wrapped only in a white towel stepped out. It was the eldest princess, Madison. Ivan panicked. He covered Megan's eyes and shouted for Madison to put on clothes immediately, reminding her there was a child in the house. Madison then noticed Megan and asked who she was. Ivan said she was his daughter and reminded her that he had already told her about his marriage, but she hadn't believed it. Madison stroked Megan's head playfully and told her to call her mom. This made Ivan furious. He asked what nonsense this was. But Madison remained calm. She leaned toward Megan and explained that this was her papa and she was his wife, which meant she was her mom. Ivan realized arguing in front of the child was useless. He gave Megan her backpack and told her to go to her room and do homework. Once Megan left, tension rose between the two. Ivan scolded her while Madison suddenly grabbed him. Indignantly, she said he had betrayed her by marrying behind her back. Ivan jerked away and told her to be careful. Madison tried to kick his head and asked if he missed her. Red with shame and anger, Ivan ordered her again to put on clothes. She sat down, crossed her legs, and said he had dared to marry another woman. They would settle accounts later. Ivan covered his face with his hands. Then he handed Madison his jacket and begged her to stay, reminding her he was married. Madison knew he had married Sarah because she was pregnant and added that if she had known earlier, she could have become the mother of his child herself. Trying to change the subject, Ivan asked how long she would stay in the city. She replied she had two tasks, finding him and discussing a business deal with Lucas. This gave Ivan some relief. She wasn't looking for Sarah, otherwise his wife would cause a scandal. He said he knew the woman she wanted to meet, but Madison continued flirting. She pinned him against the closet and asked why he treated her like a joke while being different with other women. She moved closer again. Ivan jumped back and asked what she was doing. She began stroking his face, but at that moment, Megan ran in and said she was hungry. Seeing the scene, the child immediately turned away and closed her eyes. Ivan seized the opportunity, escaped the awkward situation, and suggested they stop arguing and eat. He then put on a suit, held Megan's hand, and told Madison that if she didn't come, they would leave. Left alone, a slight blush appeared on Madison's cheeks. She whispered to herself that this man would be hers sooner or later. After that, the story moved to an elite commercial center. The three of them walked through the hall with a waiter. Megan thanked Aunt Madison, but Madison corrected her, saying she should call her godmother. As they entered the VIP room, Madison joked about her godmother role. Ivan scolded her not to say such things in front of the child. Meanwhile, in the corridor, the waiter greeted new guests. Among them was Sarah's brother Joshua, who was talking to Oliver. Joshua said they still hadn't found who had taken the project from their family. They only knew it was connected to Lucas. The conversation turned to Sarah. Joshua said she now controlled the project and wouldn't let them interfere. Oliver came up with a plan. Since Sarah was married to a courier, they could use the media to ruin her reputation. Joshua agreed. At that moment, Oliver saw a man passing through the corridor and said he looked like the man who had defeated him at the auction. Joshua saw it was Sarah's husband, the courier. He couldn't understand what he was doing there. He peeked into the room and saw Ivan sitting at a table with a beautiful woman and a child. From the outside, they looked like a happy family. Ivan and Madison were feeding Megan chicken legs together. Joshua hid and smiled, thinking he had found the perfect weapon against Sarah. Later that evening, Madison asked Megan how the food was. The child thanked Godmother. Meanwhile, Sarah stood quietly near Ivan's apartment, thinking he wasn't home. But the elevator opened and Ivan came out into the corridor with Madison and Megan. Ivan reminded Megan she had homework. Then his eyes met Sarah's. Sarah froze. Seeing another woman beside her husband, she was stunned. Madison stepped forward and directly asked Sarah if she was that girl. Ivan immediately intervened and explained that Madison was his cousin. But Sarah didn't believe it. Feeling betrayed, she said she was just passing by and had other things to do. She turned to leave. The desperate Ivan tried to stop her, saying she should at least eat before going. But Madison added fuel to the fire by asking why a husband and wife weren't living together. Sarah stopped. She composed herself and ordered him to open the door. She would have dinner here. Caught between the two women, Ivan thought to himself that living with both of them in one place was no less than a battlefield. As soon as they entered, he tried to ease the tense atmosphere and announced he was going to the kitchen to cook. Sarah turned to Madison, who was already lounging comfortably on the sofa, and asked when Ivan had learned to cook. She remembered he had once promised to cook for her. Madison said she also wanted to try his cooking. From the kitchen, Ivan shouted that he had eaten a lot and couldn't be hungry. Madison immediately switched to a flirtatious tone and pretended to complain that she was hungry again. Ivan shouted irritably for her to behave normally. Then Sarah handed Madison a bottle of water, calling her Ivan's cousin, and said she must be thirsty. Tension existed between the two women. Sarah said that looking at Madison's face, she should call her sister. Madison called out to Ivan in a playful tone again, asking when the food would be ready. Soon the protagonist came out of the kitchen with bowls of hot noodles and announced that dinner was ready. He placed the hot bowl in front of Sarah. She looked at him and her face clearly softened. His effort and the presentation of the food had clearly impressed her. Seeing this, Madison also asked for noodles. Ivan irritably told her to shut up. Sarah ignored their argument and started eating. After the first bite, she said it tasted very good and his cooking had improved. Then she suddenly said they should make a portion for Madison to but first bring her something sour. At that moment, Megan came out of the room and announced that her homework was finished and she wanted a story. Madison called her over, saying to come to Mom for a story and sweets. Megan approached but called her aunt. Madison immediately corrected her, insisting on Mom, and stroked her head. But Megan called her aunt again. Then Sarah calmly intervened. She said not to put the child in a difficult position. She called Megan over, lovingly told her to call her mom, and Megan became confused and fell silent. She instinctively looked at Ivan. Ivan nodded slightly and gave permission. As soon as she had permission, Megan called Sarah mom. Sarah praised her and said she would take her to the room to tell a story. As they left, she said goodbye to Madison, telling her to enjoy her noodles in peace. After Sarah and Megan left, only Ivan and Madison remained at the table. Ivan placed a bowl of noodles in front of her. While eating, he lit a cigarette and asked where she would sleep. It was already very late. Madison suddenly asked why, if they were married, they didn't sleep together. Ivan irritably said she talked too much and should eat and sleep. At that moment, Sarah came out of the room and told Ivan to go to bed. He agreed without hesitation. Madison watched in amazement and said she had never seen him so obedient. The next morning, the protagonist was doing intense workouts on the balcony one-handed push-ups. Sarah came out and watched. When he finished, Ivan noticed she was awake and told her breakfast was on the table. But she refused, saying she had to go to the office for the project. Ivan offered to drop her off. She declined, saying he should focus on taking Megan to school. He insisted and asked if he could pick her up in the evening, but she refused without even looking and left. Ivan smiled as he watched her go and thought to himself that his wife had a very strong character. Soon Sarah received bad news. Someone had paid the media to attack her, and authorities had halted the project. Shocked, Sarah asked how the project could be stopped. Her colleague told her to check the news link. The headline said a member of the Sue family was allegedly in a relationship with a courier. In anger, Sarah wondered who was behind this shameful attack. Meanwhile, Madison saw the news on her phone and told Ivan that his wife was in trouble. Ivan first said she was talking nonsense, but Madison insisted he look for himself. The protagonist snatched the phone. Seeing the article and photos, his face changed completely. Without wasting a second, he called Vincent and said he needed help. Meanwhile, Joshua lay in bed with a woman. She asked why he was so happy. Joshua said proudly that the news was excellent. He felt very good. Leaning toward her, he said Sarah was about to lose control of the company. It was time to celebrate. Suddenly the door was kicked open with a loud bang and Joshua jumped in shock. Vincent entered the room with two subordinates. Joshua's arrogance vanished instantly. Seeing the new leader of the Black Dragon Society, he became terrified. Vincent ordered him to get dressed. Someone wanted to see him. Joshua asked who it was. But Vincent lost patience and said rudely to stop asking useless questions and get ready immediately. Outside, Ivan waited with a cold face. Vincent reported that the delivery had been made. Joshua saw the person who had brought him here and was stunned to realize it was his brother-in-law. Emerging from the shock, fear turned to anger. He shouted asking what a delivery worker was doing here and why he had broken into his room. But the protagonist didn't answer with words. He immediately took action. He picked up a vase nearby and smashed it hard into Joshua's face. Pieces scattered and he staggered. Blood flowed from his face. Shocked and furious, he asked if Ivan wanted to die. But before he could recover, Ivan delivered a powerful slap. The blow sent him flying to the ground, but the beating didn't stop there. Ivan lifted him and angrily demanded to know if this was how he had always treated his sister. Joshua smirked and said Sarah had no right to be called his sister. Hearing this, true rage exploded inside the protagonist. He called him inhuman and delivered a crushing blow that left him nearly unconscious. He fell to his knees. But instead of Ivan, he turned to Vincent and offered to double the payment if he killed Ivan. Vincent's anger exploded. He shouted, asking how he dared insult his boss. He then delivered a brutal kick to his face. Vincent asked what to do next. Ivan said Joshua should contact the media and have all the fake articles removed. Vincent grabbed the trembling Joshua's hair and warned him to obey the order. But even in this state, Joshua refused to surrender. He begged Vincent to kill Ivan. Vincent lost patience. He delivered another blow and said if he heard one more word, it wouldn't end well. Finally, Joshua broke. He begged them to stop the beating and promised to have the media publish retractions. Vincent gave a sardonic smile and said it would have been much easier if he had been this obedient from the beginning. The story returned to Sue Group headquarters, where Sarah received bad news from her assistant. The media was demanding $800,000 to remove the articles. Sarah called it outright extortion. At that moment, the door opened and her father Sam and grandfather Albert entered. They announced that she had brought shame to the family. Sarah tried to explain that things weren't as they appeared, but no one listened. Albert called her a homewrecker. Sam added that he had already informed Chairman Stella. She was coming. Sarah stood up and said she knew someone had plotted against her, but her grandfather ignored her. Sam said there was one way to resolve the scandal, if she gave up her powers. Sarah immediately understood that this was their real goal. Sam added that the project had always belonged to them. Despite all the pressure, Sarah said they should stop dreaming of taking her powers. Her conscience was clear. The grandfather said she was too naive. If she thought Stella would entrust such an important project to a scandal-ridden woman, she was wrong. He gave an ultimatum. The Sue family's reputation was at stake. There was no choice but to hand over the powers. At that moment, Stella, Ivan's assistant, entered the office. Seeing her, Sarah and her father's attitudes changed. They greeted her respectfully. Sam began apologizing loudly. Sarah promised she would find a solution soon. But the grandfather jokingly said that silencing the media would probably cost millions. Then Stella handed her a tablet and informed her that all the negative media articles had already been removed. Sarah took the device in complete confusion. She couldn't understand how the issue had disappeared so quickly. Her father and grandfather also checked their phones. The posts had indeed been deleted, but the grandfather refused to give up. Turning to Stella, he argued that despite everything, Sarah had proven she was a problem. Stella cut him off, saying their boss had come to cooperate only with the Sue family through Sarah. Sarah tried to process everything, stopped her, and asked if she could meet their boss. Stella gave a mysterious smile and said that was not a decision she could make. Their boss's temperament was unpredictable. She then cleared her throat and left, leaving behind the dejected father and grandfather, who also left shortly after. As they left, her father warned Sarah not to be happy. Albert added that the family business was being ruined under her hands. After they left, Sarah sat thinking about who had resolved the media issue so quickly. Then her expression changed. News arrived that the courier named in the scandal had been fired from his job. Meanwhile, the story returned to the food delivery center. The hero arrived on his red motorcycle. He knew nothing about it. He greeted his colleagues and asked his fat friend for a power bank because his phone was dead. But his friend looked at him in surprise and told him he was in the news. Ivan said boredly that it was nonsense rumors. But his colleague clearly said he had been fired. He smiled confidently and asked who had the guts to fire him. At that moment, a man in a suit arrived, whom the colleagues greeted as boss. He approached Ivan and said that due to the scandal, the company's image had been damaged, so the decision had been made to fire him. Ivan objected, saying the news had been retracted and the media had published a correction. The boss explained that he didn't have the authority to overturn the parent company's decision. As a goodwill gesture, he offered to help him find a new job. He said his brother was a manager at a security firm. He also said it was normal for men to be attracted to women, but one should have confidence in oneself. When Ivan was about to leave, his colleagues said they would miss him. But they couldn't resist joking, telling him to behave a bit more decently in his new job. Ivan smiled, thanked them, and offered cigarettes and money as a treat. Then a woman's voice asked if there was someone named Ivan. Everyone was surprised. Emily appeared from behind. Seeing Ivan, she was delighted. Ivan was surprised that the teacher was here. She explained that his phone was off, so she had asked his friend where he worked. Ivan asked if she needed something. His colleagues watched with great interest. Emily said her father wanted to meet him and this wasn't a good place to talk. They should go somewhere else. Since Ivan was leaving anyway, he agreed. After they left, Ivan's old colleagues began speculating. But their conversation was interrupted when the boss suddenly kicked the fat man from behind and sent everyone back to work. Soon their attention turned to a black car. The colleagues were surprised that so many luxury cars had been coming to this ordinary company lately. Madison stepped out of the car and asked where she could find Ivan. The two men were practically mesmerized by her beauty. Shyly, they asked what her relationship to him was. Madison said she was his wife and had come to take him home. The colleagues couldn't believe Ivan had another beautiful wife. Coming to their senses, the fat man told her that he had just left with a girl and pointed in the direction. Madison crossed her arms and said irritably that this scoundrel was good at running away. Meanwhile, the hero was riding his motorcycle through the city with Emily behind him giving directions. She told him to turn left soon. A short while later, they arrived at the White Tiger Martial Arts School. Ivan noted that the hall was quite large. As they entered the courtyard, Emily said her father was upstairs. Inside, they met a muscular man named Henry, who was surprised to see Emily. She told him she had brought Ivan to meet her father. Henry looked at the hero and assumed he was a new student. But Emily immediately clarified that he was not a student but the new instructor her father had hired. Hearing this, a contemptuous smirk appeared on Henry's face. He mocked Ivan's slim build. Emily immediately scolded him, but Henry blocked the way and, trying to win Emily over, offered her to concert tickets. Emily refused, saying she had plans with Ivan this weekend. She then led him toward the stairs. Henry stood behind, filled with anger and sadness. As they climbed the stairs, the two held hands. Left alone, Henry clenched his fist and vowed to destroy that man. On the second floor, Emily called out to her father, who was drinking tea with another man at the time. Tyler immediately stood up and smilingly scolded his daughter for not telling him about such an important guest earlier. He then turned to the hero, shook hands, and invited him to sit. The moment they shook hands, Tyler felt a powerful energy from Ivan that confirmed his skill level. He praised his strength, and the protagonist humbly accepted. Tyler then introduced the hero to his friend Leo, saying this young man was the one who had saved his daughter. Getting to business, Tyler offered Ivan an instructor position at the school and added that he would also give him 5% of the company's shares after 1 year. Emily tried to intervene, but Ivan explained that he needed money because he had just lost his job. Tyler set the monthly salary at $50,000. Finally, the hero agreed. Emily's happiness was obvious. Leo also congratulated his friend on finding such an excellent instructor. After that, Tyler offered to show the new employee around the hall, and Ivan agreed. The story moved to a spacious modern training hall. Tyler gathered all the students. Standing in front, he introduced Ivan as the new instructor and invited him to say a few words. But the students were not impressed. They whispered among themselves that his body didn't look like a master's. Then Henry stepped forward on their behalf and asked what fighting styles Ivan had learned. Ivan confidently replied that he had some knowledge of different styles: Hakwon, Tai, and Wing Chun. Henry irritably said this was the jack of all trades, master of none talk. The other students sided with Henry, saying to stop talking and show action. Emily tried to intervene, but Henry said that whoever came to teach here couldn't afford to be weak. The students eagerly urged him to fight Ivan. Tyler suggested Ivan demonstrate his skills. The hero calmly agreed. Henry stepped forward. With a smirk, he warned that he hit hard but wouldn't kill him. Ivan raised his fists coolly and said coincidentally, he also hit quite hard. Henry placed a bet. If he won, he would go to the concert with Emily. Ivan noted that this depended on Emily's consent. Emily set the conditions. If Henry lost, he would give up the tickets and she would go to the concert with Ivan. Henry turned to Tyler and asked what to do if the new instructor got seriously injured. Before starting, he warned once more that there would be no mercy. Ivan calmly said to start whenever he was ready. This irritated Henry. With a loud shout, he lunged. But Ivan intercepted the attack with astonishing speed. He delivered a precise strike to his throat with the edge of his palm. Henry stopped. Without giving him time to recover, Ivan grabbed the back of his neck and delivered a powerful knee to his stomach. Henry screamed in pain. Ivan noted that his speed was good but his strength was lacking. He told him to go back and train more. Emily said admiringly that he was incredible. Leo observed that the hero was only using 30% of his power. Humiliated by this quick defeat, Henry lay on the ground muttering. He was unwilling to accept defeat. He suddenly got up and attacked from behind. Emily shouted in horror to warn Ivan of the danger. Henry grabbed Ivan from behind. He shouted that he should have died and threw him hard over his shoulder onto the training mat. Emily indignantly scolded him for sneak attacking an opponent he had already defeated. But Henry only grinned. He said in his view, showing mercy to an enemy was doing injustice to oneself. Arrogantly, he raised his foot and announced that the winner of a fight was the king. He brought it down with full force, intending to crush the hero on the ground. But the next moment, Ivan easily leapt to the side and the blow missed. The astonishment on Henry's face quickly turned to mockery. He asked if he could only run and dodge. He lunged again. Ivan calmly dodged and said the attack was too slow. It was time to teach him a lesson. He explained that in combat, there was one important principle. Speed was the only unbreakable factor. Henry was beyond endurance. He screamed, asking how he dared to be so arrogant, and swore to take his life. Leo immediately recognized the move as a deadly technique. Emily's face turned pale and she fearfully called Ivan's name, but the protagonist himself remained completely calm. He easily leapt over the attack. While airborne, he reminded Henry that he was still too slow. Without giving him time to recover, Ivan delivered a powerful knee strike that knocked Henry unconscious to the ground. Silence fell over the hall. The students watched in horror as their strongest comrade was defeated in a single blow. Emily exploded with joy. She ran to Ivan and admiringly said he was incredible. Leo noted that with this strength, this young man had probably reached the minor master level. Afterward, Ivan politely approached Tyler and apologized, saying he couldn't hold back and had injured a student. But Tyler laughed and said not to worry. His arrogant student had deserved it. When Ivan left and checked the time, it was already 11 a.m. He remembered he had to bring lunch to his wife. Then Sarah's message appeared. She wrote that she had heard about his job loss and offered to help him find a new one. The hero replied that he had already found a job with a monthly salary of 500. Sarah asked if he could at least be honest for once. This irritated Ivan that no one believed him. He took out the contract, photographed it, and sent it as proof.